Welcome to the PHP Essential Training Series. I'm Mike King, your host. And in this tutorial, we're going to look at understanding quotation marks in PHP. Now that you understand the basics on variables and how to create them, it's important to understand how to use quotation marks as we assign our string variables. PHP, like many programming languages, allows you to use both single quotation and double quotation marks in your scripting. They may appear to act the same, but they can give vastly different results, so understanding how to use them is very important. One of the rules to remember is that items within single quotation marks are treated literally. Items within double quotation marks are extrapolated. This means that when an item is within double quotation marks, a variable's name is replaced with its value. The same is not true for single quotation marks. This rule applies anywhere within PHP, so you're going to see this as we go through these tutorials, and we'll talk about this as we go through the tutorials. I just wanted to do a quick tutorial on how quotation marks work in PHP, and actually it's how quotation marks work in most programming languages. So let's look at some examples. We're going to go ahead and drop into our development environment and work through some exercises. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop out of our presentation, drop into our development environment. Confirm that we have our Apache server up and running. I'm going to go ahead and bring up Google Chrome, which will be the browser I use for this demonstration, and Sublime Text 2 will be my text editor. This is going to be a relatively fast tutorial. I just want to make certain that you understand the difference between the quotation marks in PHP. So I'm going to go into our exercise file. I'm using exercise_1.php for this exercise. I'm going to go down, and right below my H1, I'm going to open up a PHP block, and the words that less than sign are question mark in PHP. Come down a couple of lines and then close that block of code. And inside there, I'm going to create a few variables. We're going to create a first name variable. And I want that to be equal to John. I'm going to go ahead and end that with my semicolon. I'm going to come down and create a last name variable. And that's going to be equal to Smith. And I do want you to notice here that I've used two different types of quotation marks as I'm assigning these values. John, I'm using the double quotes, and on Smith, I'm using the single quotes. It's not going to have an impact here, but you're going to see in a minute where it's going to have. Then I'm going to have an other name variable, and that name is going to be equal to O'Reilly. And I'm going to start it with double quotes, do my O''Reilly, and that with a semicolon. Then I'm going to have my next name, another variable that we're creating, and this one is going to be equal to O'Hara, and I've got a single quotation mark, H-A-R-A, and I want you to notice that we've got a problem with this one, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then I'm actually going to do a couple of echoes here. I'm going to put in an echo statement, and I'm going to say echo full name. And you'll notice my code is not appearing correctly, and we'll see why in 1 minute, because it's all green now. And here I'm going to use double quotation marks. I'm going to bring in my first name variable, and I'm going to put a space in my last name variable. I'm going to end that with a semicolon, come down right below that. I'm going to echo another statement, and this is going to be whole name. And that is going to be equal to first name. Again, I'm calling that first name variable, put a space in the last name variable. Now that we've gotten everything typed in, I'm going to go ahead and, actually I should have enclosed this in single quotes. That last one should be enclosed in single quotes, and end it with a semicolon. All right, the first thing we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and save these changes to our exercise file, but there's a couple things we need to correct here, because I want you to be aware of a mistake that we made, and I made the mistake intentionally, so you can actually see what I mean about using these single and double quotes. You'll notice when we entered the name O'Reilly, I enclosed O'Reilly in double quotes, which allowed me to use that apostrophe or that single quote between the O and the R. Because on the next name I enclosed O'Hara in the single quotes, PHP thinks that the single quotes ended after the O because I have a single quote between the O and the H. If I want that to appear correctly, I have to use what's called an escape character. And that's that /. And that / tells PHP that this next quotation mark, this next single quote, is to be treated as a single quote, literally. In other words, it's not part of the quotation of the actual value. So we escaped it. Now you'll notice on the one above it, I didn't have to do that because I used double quotes. So whenever you're going to use stuff like these single quotes inside a word, it's best to enclose it in double quotes. That's the first thing I want to talk about with these quotation marks. If you're going to use single quotes like we did with O'Hara, and you have single quotes inside the actual word itself or inside the phrase, you're going to have to use an escape character. Again, that / key is the escape character to escape that single quote so it knows that it's correct. The next thing I want you to notice is when we're echoing out these full names, you'll notice on the first line, I echoed the full name out in double quotes. And it appears just like some of the demonstrations we've done earlier in variables. And below it, I echoed that out in single quotes. And actually what I want to do here is I want to put another echo statement because I actually want to echo out a line break so that these don't appear on the same line. And that's how we can do that in PHP, by the way. If you want to actually input some HTML, as you saw in the variables tutorial, I can actually put the HTML inside quotation marks. And again, these could be single or double. Makes no difference whatsoever. In fact, I'll use single quotes. Makes no difference whatsoever whether they're single or double. It'll give us a line break when we start looking at this inside the browser window. Let's go ahead and save those changes. And I want you to see the difference in the way that PHP treats this first echo statement as compared to the second echo statement with the single and the double quote. So I'm going to go ahead and save all our changes. Let's go ahead and refresh the browser window. And you'll notice when we use the double quotes, we're actually getting the values from the variables. That's what we mean by, that's called extrapolation. It's actually extrapolating the value from that variable. When I use the single quotes, I'm getting the literal variable name. As you see right here, I'm actually getting first name and last name. I'm getting the names of the variables. It's not going in and getting the data. It's actually showing me the name of the variables. So it's literally quoting this exactly as I typed it. Here we're extrapolating the data from the variable. Here we're getting the literal name because it's in single quotes. So there is a difference in the way that we use quotes inside PHP. Inside the way we declare our variables, if I don't have to worry about these apostrophes, if I were to just take that out, it makes absolutely no difference when I'm doing an assignment whether I use single or double quotes. No difference whatsoever. The only time I have to be concerned is if I have these apostrophes inside the word itself. Then if I'm going to use single quotes, I'm going to have to use an escape character to use that single quote because I actually want to encapsulate the word itself in single quotes. So when you know that you've got apostrophes inside the word where you're actually going to have to be doing some escape character keys, what I would do is I'd just use the double quotes like we did with the first one, because then you don't have a problem because the word's actually in double quotes itself. So I hope that it helps explain a little bit how we use quotation marks in PHP. There is a difference when we're actually doing things to the screen on whether or not we use single or double quotes, so you need to be aware of that. But again, when we're assigning values to variables, if it's strictly a string without any special characters, we have no problems using either single or double. And again, you'll see plenty of demonstrations as we work through the exercises in the tutorials, but I just wanted to quickly go over the difference between single and double quotes inside of PHP.